Welcome to the Creating High Performance Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Olympian Jonathan Edwards. Let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jonathan. Welcome to another weekly episode of the Raising High Performing Athletes podcast or Facebook Live, or maybe you're seeing this on YouTube. But I hope, first and foremost, I hope you share this one with someone that you love, someone that needs to hear it, someone needs to figure some stuff out, and just I want to spread the message as much as possible. So we should listen to these on Sundays, because then it'd be like the Church of Jonathan Edwards, who was a religious figure, who I was supposedly related to, but he used to preach like hellfire and brimstone. I'm not really a hellfire and brimstone kind of guy, but maybe I could be. Hey there, Helen. Good to see you. Jorge, Heather Peterson, good to see you guys. Joel Rose, welcome. Got a lot of good stuff going on. I know Jorge's athlete right now is in Innsbruck, Austria. Joel Rose's athlete just came back from another call-up on a weekend, getting called up with the big boys and getting pummeled. And Helen with her twin boys, one who is rather sick, but it's all good. I love it. I love hearing about all my athletes all over the place. So good to see you guys. So, so today I wanted to talk about this idea of attitudes and beliefs. I did a talk this past week for a local figure skating club here in Calgary. Like, obviously, as you can imagine, figure skating is pretty big here, and so it was the Lake Bonavista Figure Skating Club, and it was really great to talk to all the athletes and to have that experience. I talked to the parents for an hour, and then I talked to the athletes for an hour. So if you want me to come in and talk to your group, I'm happy to. And I like to talk to parents, I like to talk to coaches, I like to talk to athletes, because I want to try to get everybody on the same page. Because one of the things that I encourage all my athletes, is to take 100% responsibility, which I didn't always do when I was young. I mean, I want to admit, like, I probably learned that a lot later in life. And because, although I think it's different now, I think we see athletes more often now to blame things outside of them, whether that's coaches or equipment or environment, things like that, on their performance. But what happens when an athlete gets into the blame game is that there's no connection with their performance versus what with what their outcome was. So what brought this up this weekend for me was I was working with an athlete, and they have a coach who, let's put it this way, like, the coach has a pretty gruff exterior, and the coach lacks the communication skills that this athlete could really use. Okay, so one of the things that I tell everybody is that as my parents and my athletes understand, is that your coaches have abilities as well, right? So I wrote about this in my book, In an Athlete's Guide to Winning in Sports and Life, about how, as athletes, we have abilities. So we have physical abilities, technical abilities, and tactical abilities. And within those, like within the technical ability side, equipment falls in there. And so you might have coaches that are really good technically, depending on what your sport is. They might be really good with equipment. But for the most part, most coaches that I've ever been around are good tactically, right? They really want, and this can be like U8, this can be all the way up through high school, college age, Olympic level, things like that. They really just want to focus on the tactics. A figure skating coach wants to give you better choreography, right? A football coach might, knows that, hey, we need to run down this way and over there, and you're going to come around, and he's going to set a pick, and those sorts of things, right? So that's where coaches are usually geared towards, especially as you go further up the ranks in the competitiveness. Coaches are very much about tactics. Then some coaches are good technically. They're good with equipment, but they might not be good with the athlete physically, or they might not be good with the athlete tactically, but they're more technically based. A strength and conditioning coach will obviously will help with your physical side. But what I do with the work, what I do with athletes is I'm really working on that overall picture. Like, how do we understand like where are things breaking down? And so you've got the three abilities: physical, technical, tactical. But then around that, what surrounds those, like a layer, the first layer is resources, so time, energy, money. And then the second one is life skills, right? So how does an athlete manage all this stuff? How does an athlete deal with the pressures of maybe they're in school still and they're competing at a high level? Can they get to practice on time? Can they keep all their equipment together, right? Are they missing their mouthpiece or anything else for that? Do they leave their gloves on the finish dock? I know Jorge will laugh at that one. Life skills is another one. And then belief. Belief is what wraps the entire athlete, right? So people talk about like how an athlete is like physical, technical, tactical, mental. I don't believe that. Mental to me isn't like a leg on the stool. It's really mental skills. It comes from an understanding of how all this stuff works, and then belief increases. Because if an athlete is not doing well, but they lack certain life skills, well, they're going to be beating themselves up, but they're not going to necessarily know why things are going wrong, right? And so for the athlete that kind of spurred this discussion this week for me, and then working with the figure skaters at the figure skating club, one of the things I realized was that even though some coaches lack they may lack the communication style to get through to an athlete. They might not be wired to deal with the belief system of an athlete. They may not be able to deal with an athlete who, let's say, has fear, right? So a lot of coaches are what's called they're consciously incompetent, or they're unconsciously incompetent. They don't know that they don't know, or they don't have the skills to help an athlete in a certain area. They just get frustrated when an athlete doesn't do well, and they get angry because they think the athlete isn't understanding and it's their fault. And so that in some cases is on the coach, right? Like, I had an athlete who, had a coach who, no matter what that athlete did that was good, the coach was always looking for, he would always say like, but this, but that competition wasn't as good, or but the weather's not, the weather wasn't good today. So, but you still got away with this. Like, what that athlete really needed in that case was like a hug, right? What that athlete really needed was someone to say like, I'm proud of you. I love you, right? You're doing a great job. It's going to come. But this coach was very much gruff. And so what I encourage my athletes to understand is that, all right, that coach, that coach may not have a communication style that you mesh with, but you need to work with that, right? You need to recognize that and go ahead accordingly. Because what happened for this athlete in particular was their belief started to suffer. And when the belief suffers, no amount of coaching is going to help, right? Like for example, I had an athlete once who had developed a fear, and I don't want to go into too many specifics because the athlete will probably know. The athlete I know listens to these, and I want to be mindful of that. But the athlete had developed fear, and what the athlete really when you develop fear, if you keep pushing at fear, it doesn't really break all that easily, right? Imagine like this wall of fear, and it's like a big metal door. And so, you can try to hit it and tell the athlete like, hey, you just gotta, just go for it. Don't have fear, just go for it. But really what needs to happen is you need to have a different approach. Like that athlete needed a different approach. And so ultimately the coach was really resistant to any other approach because he didn't have the skills to look for another approach. That's all he knew to do was like, that was the type of coach he was. Like, you just got to hammer through it. Right. And would it be a surprise if I told you that the coach was male and the athlete was female? Right. So no wonder it wasn't really kind of meshing. But the athlete in that case lacked all sorts of belief until a second approach was made. Right. But what happened in this case was the athlete was so mired in a lack of belief for so long that now a lot of self-doubt crept in, and the attitude started to shift, and And it was really disappointing because everybody looked at the athlete and says, oh my God, you're so much more talented than this. But what was happening was that because of these external factors that the athlete didn't necessarily know how to deal with, the belief suffered. So the first thing I tell my athletes is like, listen, if you're showing up at practice today or a race or, a competition or whatever, if you're showing up on game day, like those are all what I call game day, and you're expecting it to be a bad day, you're going to get it, right? As the adults in the room, like how many of you can relate to a time when you had a more optimistic point of view and good things started to happen, right? Like my wife and I this last week, we went to a networking event for her interior design business, and we were kind of like, this kind of sucks. This isn't going to be very good. But then what we did was we caught ourselves and we said, all right, listen, we may not think it's going to be great, but let's be open to something good happening. And sure enough, something did happen. We met somebody. It was kind of cool. It was completely unrelated, and something good happened of it. And that all just came from really a difference in belief and attitude. I had an athlete recently who parents called me up and they were like, the athlete was in a bit of a funk. And I took them through my process to just kind of identify, like, all right, where is the breakdown happening? Is it physical, technical, tactical, right? Is it a resource thing? Is it an equipment thing? Is it a life skill thing, right? Or is it just a belief thing, right? Because if all the parts and pieces are there and an athlete is still lacking an understanding in one particular area, well, their belief is going to suffer, right? And their attitude is going to suffer. And so that's something we really don't want to have an athlete go through that, right? And so, but if you don't back off, if you don't realize, like as the coach, that, all right, there's certain skills that you're good at and certain skills that you lack, right? You have to meet an athlete and be honest and just say, all right, listen, so for one of my athletes this past week, I was like, what I really wanted their coach to tell them was to take them aside and go, listen, I only have one way to coach, and that may not be working here. So for those of you that have seen at athletespecific.com, I have a video. It should be on the blog, but it's also on our YouTube channel at athletespecific.com that I just really kind of started recently, where I started posting more of these videos. But I talk about the 4 elements of every athlete, right? So for those of you maybe at work, you've taken personality profiles. For young athletes, I use elements. So fire, water, earth, air, right? So it's kind of easy and it takes a little explanation for some kids, but here's one way to face it. So I've had athletes who are all fire, right? But their coach is water, right? And they don't understand each other, right? The coach is always telling the athlete, relax, just relax. And the athlete's just getting like, what do you mean relax, right? Because they're always fire. Well, could the athlete benefit from being a little bit more water in that situation? Yes. Do they know how to get there? Not necessarily. But the coach who is all water, right, doesn't necessarily know how to be fire, right? So we tend to, it's right now in especially in the news, we get upset at parents who yell at refs. Well, that's obviously a fire response, right? But we just want everybody to be like earth, which is very steady. Well, a lot of people aren't wired like that. So asking them to be like that just causes more frustration. So for the coach in this case, coach needs to understand, all right, listen, I'm all fire, right? I coach with fire, right? And maybe for this athlete, that doesn't work, right? Maybe I need to be a little bit more air, where it's like, like a little bit more ditzy blonde, right? Like it's, with all respect to the blondes who are listening, you know what I mean, right? A little ditzy blonde. We could use some of that, right? But if an athlete doesn't understand that that's a dynamic that's coming into play here, they're just going to get really frustrated. And for the coach that told that athlete, for instance, the athlete that was dealing with fear, like, hey, you just got to power through it. Well, that might have worked for that coach, but what that coach really needed to say was, hey, listen, what worked for me was, I tended to just push through, and that worked for me. But so this is where I want everybody to understand kind of the hammer and the nail theory, right? So a lot of coaches are hammers, and every athlete to them looks like a nail. But if you've done any sort of construction in your life, you know that I can't use a hammer to put a screw into a board, right? Nor can I use a drill and get a nail to go into the board. So as a coach, I view myself as a toolbox, right? I want to be a toolbox as I come to this athlete and I say, all right, listen, this is what you're missing here, is you're trying to be a hammer, like the athlete is trying to be a hammer, but the situation calls for a paintbrush, right? So we have to develop those tools to survive. And I wrote about this in my book about the idea of like every athlete just has two jobs, right? An athlete is either withstanding challenges or taking advantage of opportunity, right? So just two things: withstanding challenges and taking advantage of opportunity. So if your athlete is a hammer and says like, this is me, well, they're probably going to be good withstanding some challenges, but they're also probably going to miss a lot of opportunities. Vice versa, like an athlete who is like super quick and crafty, but maybe they're not strong physically, well, they're going to get bowled over by some challenges, but they may be able to take advantage of some opportunities. But a coach also needs to understand that and help an athlete find a way to express that, because otherwise an athlete's belief starts to suffer and then their attitude goes real negative, right? They start going like, oh, it's just going to be the same thing today as it was yesterday. Coach hates me, or I'm never any good. And the negative thoughts like stream in. On athletespecific.com, I've got that PDF that you guys can get about how to deal with automatic negative thoughts, right? Athletes need tools to deal with those things, because it's not like we can keep them all from going away. I told the figure skaters this weekend, I'm like, a lot of people portray this picture like a great athlete is someone whose head is just filled with like cotton candy and pink unicorns, right? It's like, and glitter, right? It's not like that, right? Not all athletes are like that. Every athlete comes to it with their own element, their own primary element. Maybe they are fire, or maybe they are like airy, right? I competed with athletes like that who were pretty airy, and it served them really well in certain situations, but in others they just needed a little bit of, a little bit of fire. Same thing goes. My first sports psychologist was all about water, right? His primary focus was all about being water, and you're like a leaf on a river. And I'm like, yeah, really? And it worked. For me, I was open to it. It made sense to me. I adopted some of that, and that was really helpful. But a lot of athletes are like, what are you talking about? Right? So being aware that there's a difference allows an athlete to start to go like, okay, what do I need to do to survive this situation? Right? What do I need to be ready for anything? That's really the attitude we want our athletes to have, is we want them to be ready for anything. We want to be ready for bad weather, or tough competitions, but we also want them to be ready for, dealing with bad coaches or coaches they don't really mesh with, or, dealing with losing a sponsor, or, when I was on the U.S. national team, we had an interesting situation. The fall before the Olympics, one of our athletes got attacked by neo-Nazi skinheads in East Germany. Right, old East Germany. It was the first documented attack of an American by neo-Nazi skinheads. And it happened at a time where the U.S. Olympic Committee was having this massive event with the president. The president at the time was Bill Clinton. So this thing went from like, our guy got beat up at a bar in Oberhof, Germany, to Bill Clinton in like 6 hours. And then it all of a sudden it escalated, and we were getting escorted out of Germany with a police, escort to go to Austria. And when we got to Austria, the press just like came all over the team. And this is right before the Olympics. And so, but we needed to be ready for anything. So we needed to adopt a belief that, hey, all right, I can handle anything. I'm ready for this, no matter what goes my way or doesn't go my way. And the one thing I would add here is that I encourage my athletes to have a little bit of if I've got good rapport with my athlete, I might swear here, but I might throw an F-bomb. So bear with me. I'm not gonna do it here. I'm gonna keep this G-rated. But you really want your athlete to learn how to kind of get messed with, right? For lack of a better term, right? We want to throw, curveballs at them because, we want to develop this attitude that you're ready for anything, right? We want them to believe that, oh yeah, it's snowy, it's rainy, it's sunny, it's cloudy, whatever it is today, you can deal with that, right? Oh, your coach is a jerk. Yeah, you can deal with that. Oh, your parents just got divorced today. I don't know how we trained for that, but you know what I mean? Like, your parents, you can be ready for that. You can be ready for anything. So I want you to, as parents, adopt a bit of that attitude to understand that, if you're like super rigid in your way of dealing with things, if you're all fire, well, there's going to be moments where that's not appropriate. And I love this, and I can speak as a parent, hey, you can be one dominant element and your athlete can be a complete opposite side of that element, right? And you're just like, especially if you're fire, right? Which I know some people watching right now, you're more fire than you are water. You're just like, God, come on. I wish he would get this, right? Like, I get, and I think that's just God's way. That's the universe's way of just kind of throwing you a curveball, right? But you're stuck with that curveball for like 20 some odd years, right? So, but it's really important that you just take some time to help an athlete understand the big picture. It's for the athletes that are part of my breakthrough blueprint. It's a lot of the work that I do is helping them understand these capabilities because we want their belief to be high. Because I want an athlete to show up. It doesn't matter practice, game day, it doesn't matter. They've got to have a good attitude and a good belief because if they don't, then they're really kind of starting off behind the eight ball, right? But to get there takes a lot of work, right? It's not a Band-Aid fix. It takes a lot of work. It's not about like visualizing or breathing or things like that. It goes much deeper than that. So as the parent, you can really help that. And then that will carry down to the attitude because if you're frustrated, if you go into things like at work or in your relationship with your spouse, like that all carries down. And I see that now with my own kids and I kick myself for certain things, that I do that I'm not happy about, right? Whether it's work related or it's financial or any of those things, or things aren't going the way I really want them to go, right? I see that in my kids now and it drives me crazy. And I'm sure it drives all of you crazy too. So, but if we can be better, then they're going to be better. And that's really important. So listen, I appreciate everybody who's been on live today. If you're listening to me on iTunes or if you're in your car, send me a message. Like if this resonated with you, send me a message. You could find me on Facebook at Olympic Jonathan or at Athlete Specific or things like that. If you've got an athlete in your world that is ready to take the jump into the blueprint and they're looking for 12 weeks of mental performance training, then I'm your guy. And so one of the best gifts you can give this holiday season is the gift of mental performance. So if that's something, I suggest you book a call. So athletespecific.com/call. And right as I get off of this, I'm doing a breakthrough call with a guy from New Zealand for his athlete, and I'm excited about that. But as always, thank you for all the feedback. And if you've got a topic you want me to cover in future episodes, you can email me as well, coachedwards@athletespecific.com. All right, everybody, here's to a great week for you and your athlete, and I will see you guys next week. Cheers. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's Jonathan, and do me a favor, share this with an athlete, a parent, or coach who needs to hear it. And then head on over to athletespecific.com and download any of our freebies. We've got free automatic negative thought download, free webinars, free courses for athletes and parents, and I hope to see you there soon. Cheers.